Hi everyone! Today I am sitting down with Sarah Cortez, poet, writer, editor, and police officer. For Musiqa's season opener origin stories, she's going to read a world premiere of a work that she's written about her own origin story. Come on in. Yes, what drew you to writing initially?
The magic of words. That's what drew me to writing from the very first. At 3 years old, I remember my mother beginning to teach me words, letters, symbols, and using a photograph. And I fell in love with the power of containing the mystery and treasure of the photograph inside symbol.
So for composers, sometimes the hardest part of writing a piece is starting. So how do you start a work of poetry, and what is the most difficult part of the process?
I always begin my poems with the first line, and I always get the first line, it just comes into my mind. It usually comes into my mind at an inconvenient time, like when I'm driving, washing the dishes, or taking a shower. But I always memorize it. It's usually a phrase, not a complete sentence, and it always stays in the poem, and that's been my process from, I don't know, over 20 years in writing poetry, or often short stories, although short stories are a little trickier as whether or not the first line stays in place.
And what is the most difficult part?
I think the most difficult part, probably like in every piece of writing, is revision, because you don't want to lose the power of the impulse. You want to allow the impulse for the poem or piece of writing to grow and shape the piece of writing. That's the creative part that no writer knows when he or she begins a piece where it's going to, or should know where it's going to go. There's an awful lot of writing books that say if you know where a piece is going to end up, you're not really writing. You're constricting the piece. You're putting the piece in jail, as it were. So revision is tough. Almost nobody teaches it. At least they didn't when I started writing, and that's why I often try to teach classes where the students have to revise a certain number of times for their final portfolio, so I can teach them how to revise, because it's a complicated skill.
Where did poetry and policing begin to intersect?
Let's see. I was writing poetry for about 3 or 4 years before I went into police work, and I actually did not write any poetry about policing for at least maybe the first couple of years. I was writing about my very complicated and wonderful Hispanic family, and I was writing about day-to-day events, and I was attending a writer's workshop in Oregon, and I was actually taking a nap one afternoon because classes were held in the morning, and I just got this line of poetry in my mind, and I jumped up and started and wrote the poem. And it's again, I was given the gift of a first line, and it's actually one of the humorous poems I've written about policing. Most of the ones are not humorous because most of what you see is not humorous, but that one stayed.
That's perfect. Do you remember what the first line was?
Yes. She's a dish, that Rosie. So the poem goes on to talk about another female officer I worked with, my first police department, whose first name was Rosie, and we were in the females' locker room, and we were getting undressed from working undercover. So she was pulling her radio. Police radios in that era were about that long. Her police radio, her handcuffs, which are heavy, her 9mm, 8-inch long, semi-automatic, and she pulls it all out from the center of her bra. So it was a humorous piece. I will say the gentlemen still love it when I read that piece.
That is so cool. Rosie, are you still in touch with her?
You know, I'm not, but I know after we both transitioned from that police department to me to another department, and I think her to a civilian job and her second marriage, I know that I still get guys that ask me for her phone number. And I say, she's happily married. I don't think she wants you calling her. Oh.
She's a dish.
She's a dish, that Rosie.
That's cool. What drew you to police work after? So, let's go back. What did you major in college?
Okay.
And then how did that transition to police work?
Okay. In college, I had a double major at Rice, psychology and religion. And I wanted to go into the psychology religion. And I spent a long time in comparative mythology. I worked at Rice for 2 years after I graduated, so I could take courses for free, a few courses. All of those were in comparative mythology, and I taught myself ancient Greek. I knew Latin because I had a Catholic, wonderful, fabulous Catholic school education in high school, so I already knew Latin. But I need to learn Greek. I decided to get a master's in classical studies, which is basically Greek and Latin in those cultures. I taught Latin in high school for a while here in Houston. Then I got practical and got an accounting degree because my salary was just rock bottom teaching high school. And with my accounting degree, I launched the business part of my existence, my corporate career. And it was during that corporate career that I did a lot of civic work here in Montrose. And at that time, we were overrun by crime. We sort of still are, but it's a different kind of crime. And a whole group of us, actually a group of 30,000 people who were a civic club, started working with the Houston Police Department to proactively address the crime issues. And so that was where I started meeting police officers sort of for the first time in my life. And I discovered all my negative stereotypes were unreal. I mean, they didn't correspond to the people I met, both men and women. And I fell in love. I just fell in love with public service. I fell in love with keeping people safe, the mission to keep people safe, and the mission to stand up for what I believed, because I believe in certain things, not stealing, not lying, not all the list of crimes we all could recite. And so police officers are there on the front line to stand up, because most civilians cannot or will not in today's society anymore.
So what is your favorite type of music?
Well, for dancing, I love to dance, which is not to say I'm good at it, but I love it. Zydeco. There's nothing better than having a couple cold beers and being someplace with a good Zydeco band and a lot of people that love to dance, especially when you get these, which you often do, and sort of some of the smaller Zydeco dances, you get these sort of elderly women in their high heels, in their hose, in their gloves, in their hat, and their Sunday best dress, and you get the gentlemen who are similarly attired with their beautiful suits and the matching handkerchief to the tie and their shine shoes, and there they are, and they are doing all this amazing Zydeco dancing, incorporating elements of swing and Zydeco. I adore Zydeco music. I also love opera too, so I guess you could say I have a wide range. Classical opera, Puccini and Mozart and on and on.
Okay, so for the concert itself, what are you most excited about and what are you most nervous for?
Well, there's a bunch of ways that I'm excited. So first of all, to hear what the composers have done, because all the composers sound amazing, including Anthony Brand. So I'm really looking forward to meeting him in person, to becoming more acquainted with his work, because I've read about him. So that's a huge, amazing, exciting thing for me. The other is, I love the theme of origins. I think that is the choice of that theme speaks to me on so many levels, both as a writer and as, you know, as a citizen in this polis, to use a Greek word, you know, this city where we're all intertwined and we're all trying, well, maybe not all, but for the sake of argument, I will say all trying to contribute in a positive way to the intertwined structure that we are forced to have in a city. So I love the idea of beginnings because the honoring of where we all come from culturally, even emotionally and mentally, is very important. I also think it's just as important to go beyond where we come from. I think that's where the joy in creation is, the inherent joy in creation, is that we take whatever it is in us, and you can say heart, mind, soul, however different people configure that different way, conscious, unconscious, so forth. But all of this mystery that's inside of us, because I think we all are inherently a mystery. You take this mystery of where you come from, all your history, all your internal both woundings and strengths, and you if you're lucky, you know, you have some experience of creating something out of that. And I think that's one of the keys to true joy in life. I don't think it's the only key, but I think those people who can do that and participate in a positive way, not in an egocentric way, like look at me, hey, I've done this, I'm great, but really in a heartfelt, humble way. That's so important, or it's important to me as a writer, and all the other efforts I do to support the writing community in Houston. So lots of exciting stuff on that night.
And what are you most nervous for?
What nervous? Gosh. Well, I want to do a good job. I always want to do a really good, beyond competent job for the people that I'm working for and with. So that's my goal. I'll give you a little preview about what I'm working, some of the themes I'm working with in my Origins poetry. I'm taking my family history, which is very complicated, like most family histories are, certainly in America, because we're such a mixed bag of cultures and traditions and heritages and movement. I'm taking my complicated origin, which includes Spain, the Apaches, the Comanches, the French, a little bit from Mexico, but not very much, and trying to honor and look at all of that in terms of origins, as well in terms of what those people who don't have those origins, what are the common bonds? Because I think whatever the treasures are for all of us in our origins are meant to be shared. And so that's what I'm trying to write poetry toward.